Waterwight, Book 1, Chapter 34. Now we're with Celeste. Startled awake, Celeste sat bolt upright in her wavy bed before its ripple tossed her back onto her side. A shadow bigger than all the others had just surged overhead, its mass pressing in on the protective bubble and causing the waterbed to react with its shock. Yikes! Celeste jumped from the bed and crouched beside it. She wondered how she'd been able to sleep at all, surrounded as she was by potentially threatening sea creatures. She looked around her stark room and tried to imagine who would have thought the design was a good idea. Other than her princess bed, which had lulled her to sleep beautifully, the room was a vast, empty space. But as frightening as the looming world outside her bubble appeared, it nevertheless lured her closer. 1, 2, 3. She counted the giant steps needed to reach the farthest wall from her bed. She was learning how to keep her balance on the slippery carpet. 25. She finished when her last step brought her within touching distance of the bubble. Hesitantly, she raised both hands to the translucent, swirling rainbow, but stopped just short of touching it. If it pops, I'm a goner. Just as she lowered her hands, a shadow beyond the bubble grew in size as it approached, seeming to come at her head-on until 2 great eyes appeared within its bulbous head. Celeste slipped and fell just as grasping tentacles of a great octopus spread onto the outside surface of the bubble. She quickly overcame the panic rising in her chest and was unable to turn away from the eyes of the spectacular creature. She sat and stared, and the creature stared back. All was silent and motionless for what seemed like an eternity, and then a faraway voice shook her from her reverie. Away, away, run away, away. A gurgling voice sounded in her head before fading away. Who's there? Who said that? Celeste shouted. The octopus disengaged and scuttled away. She stood on shaking legs, her stomach growling, and remembered her mother's comment about waking her for lunch. She had no idea of the time or of how long she'd slept. Run away? She said aloud, and a smile replaced the panic. Why would I want to run away? Yet the words, away, away, troubled her. They echoed in her mind like a distant memory. Hearing a high-pitched whine, she ran and slid to the bedroom door and peeked through the curtain of seaweed. On the other side, Ranger sat on the sandy staircase, his tail flipping a dusty mess from side to side. Come in and play with me, Celeste entreated the puppy, but he wouldn't come through the door. I was scared too, but now it's really cool. You should have seen the octopus. Nothing she could say would coax the small dog to her, so she joined him instead, and the two trotted up the stairs and hurried to the kitchen where her mother was making sandwiches. Here you go, dear. She handed Celeste a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, with extra jelly and no crust, just like you like it. Feeling better? Celeste couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten her favorite sandwich, and her mouth watered. Yeah, thanks, Mom. A little better. She devoured the sandwich. Could I have another, please? Celeste noticed a hint of confusion and a fleeting frown cross her mother's face. Another? Yes, you must have another. The woman furrowed her brow as if making a very important decision. If it's too much trouble, don't worry about it. It was just so good and I was so hungry, I hardly had time to taste it. No trouble, dear. She reopened the bread package mechanically. And you don't have to cut off the crusts anymore, Mom. I'm almost a grown-up. Celeste's announcement made her mother appear even more confused. Oh my, yes, you're growing up. She patted Celeste on the head. It took longer for her to make the sandwich without cutting off the crusts, and after finishing it, she clasped her hands behind her back and rocked gently from side to side while Celeste ate. When she finally felt full, Celeste kissed her mother on the cheek and ran to the door with Ranger at her heels. Going out to explore, she announced before passing through the doorway. Be careful, dear, and come back before dinner. The word dinner made her stomach growl again, but she ignored it. She couldn't still be hungry after eating 2 whole sandwiches. She was anxious to discover what surprises the other rooms in her expansive home held. She remembered the swing set and building blocks and book room and jigsaw puzzle room and how she had already made a decision to stay away from the last one. The puzzle made her feel anxious, and she tried in vain to remember the scene in the finished product. Ranger scampered ahead of her and stopped abruptly by a new door. Okay, little guy, I guess we'll start here. She followed him into what appeared at first to be a tiny, dark room. Her eyes adjusted quickly, and she joined her puppy, who had nestled into a mossy nook just steps away from the doorway. Is this your hiding place? She flopped down in the strangely familiar place and pulled the dog onto her chest. Oh! She gasped when she looked to the ceiling above, because there was no ceiling. Above her and for miles around, the heavens expanded. Galaxies created patchwork patterns, and comets blazed sparkling arcs across the sky. The moon hung so full and low, she wanted to touch it, and the thrill of it warmed her whole body. She sat up, and when she looked around her, she gasped again. She and her puppy were perched upon a boulder atop a craggy, sprawling mountain range. It's beautiful. She stood to take in the expansive moonlit vista. Oops! A wave of dizziness made her tumble back into the mossy nook. Ranger licked her face and whimpered softly. I could stay here forever, she whispered, following the arc of a falling star. Where the star expended its final burst of light, 2 doves took flight, silhouetted briefly by the flare. The sight of them startled her, and for a moment she was confused. Ouch! She grasped her stomach again. Is it dinner time already? A moment of panic seized her when she couldn't find the door. Where are we, Ranger, and how do we get home? The dog led her to the doorway just a few steps away, but it seemed like she had hiked for miles to get to it. Exhausted from her hike from the mountaintop to the slippery hallway, she was cheered by the happy child song leading her back to the kitchen door, from which aromas of seafood and melted butter wafted. Time for dinner, her father called to her from the doorway. It's your favorite. Come give Daddy a hug. That ends chapter 34 of book 1.